welcome to a new garden. You may remember that a month or two ago we made a vegetable garden here. This is the first time that I've seen the garden since we made and planted it. So for our last program of the year, let's have a look and just see what the progress has been. Just as a reminder, and for the benefit of people who didn't see the program, here's how we went about it. We removed the buffalo turfs, or the grass turfs, spading down around them, and then we dug the whole area over, and at the same time we turned in some homemade compost and a bag of mushroom compost. We then built the beds up, which is desirable for drainage, using a long-handled shovel and a cord just to mark the edge of the bed, and leaving the drain as the path between them. Then we limed most of them. In this first bed we planted 2 short rows of beans, which is about enough for an average family. Now, as this soil is rather stony, to get rid of the stones, because we wanted to plant good, decent-sized long carrots, we fashioned a canoe-shaped sieve out of bird wire. In the next bed, we planted the tomatoes. We planted Mighty Reds, which is a tall-growing variety. We did put some stakes in temporarily, but because of the height that they ultimately reached, suggested that the stakes might need extending. They need pruning too. Well, let's have a look at the progress. You can see everything's grown, including the weeds. Actually, it has been weeded, but we've had a fair amount of rain and a lot of warmth following it, so summer grass are really racing away. We'll come to weeding in a moment. But the beans are doing well, about to bear. A few yellow leaves, we'll look at those later. Lettuce are just about ready to pick. A few snail holes, nothing that a few snail boats won't fix. The carrots looking good, they're coming on nicely. Beetroot a bit slow. And the tomatoes are really growing and need a little bit of trimming up. Now, let's tackle the weeds first. In an area like this, I'm inclined to start from the edge of the bed, and particularly as we've just cut this out of the grass is inclined to invade or grow through, so where you have no growth, just lift as you spade down, and you find that all of those weeds have just been loosened, and they come out very easily and leave quite a clean edge. We've got weeds in the paths like this. I think perhaps the best thing is to use a sharpened spade to get under it. And then you'll find that where you've spaded, you don't have to go deeply, incidentally, because summer grass, like most of these other weeds, once you cut below the crown, it just doesn't regenerate. Now, with the crescent hoe, you can get in between the rows, say with those carrots there, for example, and just take the cut below the weeds, and those, of course, will die off very rapidly. We can do this through the beetroot too. If you've got close weeding in between the plants, and say along where, say, carrots have been sown, an old knife is a good idea, because then you can get really close into the rows. It's really quite a simple job. If you do have prolonged wet, when the ground remains sticky and you can't scuffle, well, there are chemical weeders like Weed-X and Polyquat that you can use for the broad weeding, providing you're very careful and keep them away from the actual plants, and of course providing you observe the label directions. Well, that's most of the weeding out of the road, or the worst of the weeding anyway. It's look, the carrots are doing particularly well here. They've got another 3 or 4 weeks to go before they start to make up. They need normally about 12 weeks, even these modern ones, but people often ask when. You'll soon know, because the tops usually start to show above the ground, and you can feel down if there's a well-developed top, well, you can take an odd one out. Beans are doing quite well. They're just starting to produce. They're looking a little bit on the yellow side, but a dressing of complete plant food just down the centre of the row would pick them up from that. And I noticed down the front of the row we have one fatality here. It's probably Fusarium, as we've had some fairly bad weather. Yes, you can see where the stem is rather shriveled. It could have been mechanical damage too. Usually, oh yes, it is the Fusarium, because you break the stem open and you'll notice that purplish brown extending up and down through the conducting tissue, but fortunately it only affects about 10% of the crop anyway. Lettuce are grand. Some of them can be used, and this is the idea. Take the most forward ones first and gradually, well, let the others mature, and it thins them out a little bit anyway. There's an odd brown leaf which is not terribly serious. A little bit of downy mildew, but really no need to spray for that. These varieties are fairly resistant. We are going to plant some more lettuce though. Actually, I think you can plant lettuce every couple of weeks, but when the summer's coming on, or when the warmer weather is coming on, you have to be a little bit more careful planting than you normally would, because any check and the seedlings will run up to seed instead of making heart. So when you take them out of the punnet, I'll only do this with half, because we're only going to plant a few of them now. I always suggest to separate them up. Don't pull them apart, because that tends to break the roots, but just put the whole lot down on a hard surface. I'll put the trowel down and just throw them like that to break all the roots up, and they tend to separate out. Now, we did lime this soil previously, but we can have a little more complete plant food. I'm not quite sure how far we extended with that, but normally the rate of about 1/3 of a cup to the square metre. We'll just mix that in and compact it a little bit with the wet weather that we have had after this bed was prepared. Just firm that down slightly, and with your seedlings, I would say we'll plant them quite close here, because those lettuce there will be coming out within a week or so. And I always like, instead of putting those roots together, to put your finger under them so that they spread, put them into a relatively shallow hole, firm a little soil over the roots, and proceed that way. And then the important thing, because it is hot now, is to water them as soon as you put them in, preferably, and to shade them with a few twigs or something like that. With the corn on our left, it's progressing very nicely. I notice where they've been knocked in the rows, some of them are starting to keel over. Well, it's a good idea to hill them up. This path we haven't completely weeded yet, but when the path's weeded, you can hill up a bit of soil from the side just to give them that support. Beetroot is a bit slow, but one of the things you can do with beetroot, you can give it a little bit of complete plant food, but don't keep doing it, but you can give it a little bit of salt where they're starting to warm up. Use about a teaspoon of salt in, say, a gallon and a half of water, and just water the row over, and don't put on the other plants, just the beetroot, and that does work fairly well. Tomatoes are actually forming, but they've made a lot of growth, and this needs to be tidied up. They need to be pruned, and they also need to be staked. These preliminary stakes were far too short for tall tomatoes like Mighty Red, but I did suggest when we planted that we could easily tie on a bit of bamboo. You could replace them where you could tie on, but the original stake's fairly firm, so here we're just tying on You can tie them with pea wire, which is a bit more permanent. All I'm using here is flax, which will last for a few months anyway, just about last the crop out. But of course you want to make several ties at the base too, as I already have. Otherwise they'll twist out on you. Now really these tomatoes should have been pruned in the very early stage, and normally you only allow about one or at the most two leads for any of those tall types. But here they've gone a little bit too far to be too vigorous. But what you do to be, well, too drastic with the pruning, what you do normally when they make a lateral, which always comes from a leaf junction like that, there's the leaf, there's the junction, there's the lateral coming from it, you just pull that out, just like that. That stops all that excessive bushiness. People are afraid to do this because they feel that they'll be losing flower, but that's not the case. The flowers come from the stem between the leaves. You see where I've taken the lateral out, you can see the flower cluster and the young fruit already forming. If you let these go, eventually they will make flowers, but you'll have too much bush for the root to support, and you won't get mighty big tomatoes. Now with your tie, when you're tying the tomatoes themselves, and you need to do that about every 25 centimetres, make the tie first firmly around the stake, like that. Make a definite knot on that, and then just a loose tie around the plant so that you don't choke the young stem. That's most important. Incidentally, this flax is very good for tying about the garden, and nearly anyone can use it. If anyone's got an old clump of flax, they can always take the outer leaves off it without affecting the general appearance, and all you do then is just strip the leaf down a little bit like that to whatever width you want. Even the thinner ones are quite strong, and while it's green you certainly won't break it and will remain for quite a while. With the tomatoes, a little bit of tomato dust would stop this spotting. You've got both septoria and a bit of blight. But then, of course, in some areas the problem is the fruit fly. Now, you can spray using Labacid or Roga, following the directions on the bottle, but providing you don't use it within 7 to 8 days of picking the fruit, which means you've got to pick everything that's liable to ripen in that time, then spray. But if you don't like spraying, you can put paper bags over the fruit. When it starts to move from that bright green to a pale sort of creamy green colour, when the first fruits like that change, you can put your paper bag over and just keep the fruit fly out. And the owners of this garden certainly should be enjoying garden fresh vegetables over Christmas and later, and so can you. And speaking of Christmas, the ABC again has my gardening calendar for 1985. This time the theme is on Australian native plants, and each month has reminders on the front of what to do in the garden at that particular time, and on the back of the page full details of how to do it. From In Your Garden, may I wish you all the very best for Christmas and the New Year. Thank you for being with us, and very good gardening.